Destiny doesn't believe morals exist objectively in general, so I'm wondering how it's a good game or a bad game anyway. There's the symbolic death, which is actually like the death of the symbolic order or your identity within the symbolic order, and then there is the real death, and in between these two is the game.
This is for me a good alienation. I hate people who open.
I like that he's turned psychological alienation from Marx on its head. There is a good form of alienation. There is a good alienation from the self. That's nice. That's nice. This is a DMT trip at this point. This isn't a spiritual experience. Hello, my fellow philosophers, and welcome to what should be a very interesting stream. Today we are going to be watching Destiny, Debate Bro and Gamer and Slavoj Zizek, cultural critic and philosopher, debate some way. I'm not exactly sure who put this together, what they'll talk about. So this is going to be a very raw, visceral reaction because I've not seen this myself. So, well, there. Let's just get into it. This should be a very interesting stream. No, but we won't be impersonating Zizek at all. Right, let's go. It's not really a debate. All right, well, that's probably for the best, isn't it?
Thank you so much, and welcome everyone to today's debate. Thank you for being here on this very sunny day. Games are everywhere, and not just on the football field. Workplaces, dating lives, education, and even friendships are being packaged as games.
Oh, I see. So we're going for games. So it's like game theory sort of stuff.
Tinder makes love a swiping game of Snap. AI claims to have solved long-standing scientific problems by converting them into games. But critics argue games distort life and empty it of meaning. And games can be dangerous. QAnon was created initially as an alternative reality game, and the world is not made safer by understanding military build-up as an arms race. Do we need to eradicate the relentless gamification of life? Should we recognize life has no clear goal, no way to win, no measures of success, no extra life?
That's a bit dark.
Lives or second chances? Should we see games as furthering inequality, creating winners and losers? Or have games always been with us, from the system of money to the hierarchies of education, and for the very good reason that they are a remarkably powerful motivator for action? Now, to discuss these issues and many more, we have this wonderful panel. Thank you for being with us. I'll start with, on my far left, entirely unironically, we have Slavoj Zizek, is a world-renowned philosopher, cultural critic, and public intellectual. He's the director of the Birkbeck Institute for the Humanities at the University of London, visiting professor at New York University, and a senior researcher at the University of Ljubljana, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Department of Philosophy. Thank you. To my right, we have Stephen Bennell, who is an American internet personality and political commentator. He made a name for himself as one of the first people to stream video games online full-time, and is now renowned.
Is there something so mad about this? It's just one of the biggest political, like the political, one of the biggest political critics in the contemporary era. Is and then just gamer on the other side. It's class. I love it. Love it.
For his combative debates and left-wing takes. And to my left, Lisa Miller is a professor of psychology and education at Columbia University and founder of the Spirituality Mind Body Institute. Welcome to my panel. Thank you so much. Now, the way this is going to work is that each of you will have 3 minutes to lay out your position on the opening pitch question, which is, do we need to eradicate the relentless gamification of life? Lisa, over to you.
Thank you. So every one of us here in this entire room is hardwired.
So she's the spiritualist here, apparently, whatever that means. Is this... I'm not sure what that's going to entail, but we're going to find out, aren't we? Yeah, well, we're going to see.
Whether you've been told or not, with a naturally spiritual brain. Whether you are Hindu, Jewish, Muslim, Sikh, spiritual or not religious. Whether you say acts of service, nature.
Just leave Christianity out of there. The largest religion, well, I don't know what that one is
my cathedral. You were born on day one with a naturally spiritual brain, which means that life in...
Oh, continue watching. Oh, no, stop. All right, okay, guys, 1 second. Okay, we're back.
We are far more innovative, far more kind, far more on our game. In these times, we have overstrengthened the bicep and left to atrophy the tricep. There is achieving awareness in the air and water of our cultures. There is achieving awareness in our universities and primary schools. What do I want? How am I going to get it? And how will I close the deal? How will I win the game? But a game has certain rules before ever walking in the door. And the first is that we might agree to play. Is hunting a game? If the animal didn't agree?
Where we're going with this, crazy lady?
What about an
Well, it's not crazy, but like, you know, where we're going with this?
experimental design, gamesmanship brought to a controlled clinical trial when half of us are randomly assigned to a control group in a COVID pandemic? Has gamesmanship overextended along with the relentless measurement, competition, and overexertion of our achieving awareness to the exclusion of the deep seat of perception in which you are not my competition, you are my trail angel, in which you are not trying to take from me. Who are you? You are my teacher. There's another way of knowing, another way of being. And when we realize that we are both awakened and achieving, then we have a life that is far more robust, far healthier, and we see through MRI studies, we even strengthen the neurocortex of our awakened brain to be less depressed during a pandemic of despair, to be more innovative in a time of discontent, and to know that we are part of one deeper family of life, white caps on one ocean, interbeing, in a time marked by conflict and over-identification with that which is external. I believe in all of us, but I particularly believe in Gen Z back there. You hold our feet to the fire for animal rights, for human rights, for gay rights. You work as a team.
Gen Z, is it? You're just selling millennials down the road, eh? Like, we're not good enough anymore. No, there's just a new generation now. They're the... All right, I see how it is. We had our time.
And you know that your bio bodysuit alone does not define you. You have brothers and sisters all over the world.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Wow, what an opener. Stephen, over to you. 3 minutes on, do we need to eradicate the relentless gamification of life?
I felt like I'd rather follow Zizek, but put me on the spot. One of the things that I talk about a lot on my YouTube channel and my stream is I feel like people are generally very quick to ascribe morality to systems that I believe exist entirely amorally. And I would say that the same exists for games. I think that in life there are good games. We can imagine a parent doing chores with their child, turning into a game. And I imagine in life there can also be bad games. We can imagine people making a game out of, I think, arms races, or the arms race was an example given earlier. I think that the most important thing to do with...
I don't understand. Games exist amorally, but there can be good games and bad games. Like, I thought, like, like, I don't know, like...
Gamification of life.
I feel like I'd rather follow Zizek, but put me on the spot. One of the things that I talk about a lot on my YouTube channel and my stream is I feel like people are generally very quick to ascribe morality to systems that I believe exist entirely amorally. And I would say that the same exists for games. I think that in life there are good games. We can imagine a parent doing chores with their child, turning into a game.
I mean, I happen to know Destiny doesn't believe morals exist objectively in general, so I'm wondering how it's a good game or a bad game anyway. Because obviously the game is what defines good and bad for Destiny, right? Like, that's how he sort of approaches it, because he's a social contract theorist at best. And at worst, he's just a pure egoist. So, like, the good or bad is just sort of subject dependent, right? And actually, at worst, he's a total emotivist even. Like, so I'm not sure what a good or bad game would necessarily entail in this respect. So, but I know what he's getting at. I do agree there are good and bad games. Like, games themselves don't have to be good or bad. I think he's right in saying that.
And I imagine in life there can also be bad games. We can imagine people making a game out of, I think, arms races, or the arms race was an example given earlier. I think that the most important thing to do with any given system that we're talking about is to make sure that we're aiming it for a positive end. I think that right now, when we talk about the gamification of life, I think we're generally talking about a lot of negative types of gamifications that seem to exist. So, for instance, it seems like there's a lot of misery being created by the amount of online time that we spend, or how digitized everything has become, with Tinder being a really great example. That we've taken the pretty human interaction of two people going on a date and talking to each other, and now we've digitized it into how tall are you, what hobbies do you have, what political affiliation you have, and then taking the totality of that and then swiping right or left based on how we feel about it.
You know what's weird as well? Like, how tall are you is not even on Tinder, right? I want to point that out. It's not even there. We've managed to like essentially gamify, or one of the rules of the game, like implicit rule of the game, is to either put your height or to stand next to others, which sort of indicate your height. And so, like, your height and your build are essentially judged from, like, essentially a metric where it shouldn't even be available, really. Like, this is the sort of twisted thing. And if it's not, like, they're going to ask. It's sort of like an implicit sort of like how... I don't want to say it's an implicit rule to declare your height, but it's there.
So I feel like if we approach life as a game, which I think undoubtedly it is, the important thing is to identify a certain set of rules. So those are going to be the legal systems we have, and then whatever personal moral philosophies we have, and then to aim it in a certain direction. And I believe that the biggest problem with the gamification of life right now is that we don't aim it in a good direction. Largely in the West, I think the big criticisms are that the direction that it's been aimed at are relentlessly consumerist. So can you buy the biggest house? Can you buy the most cars? Can you have the best, whatever it is, whatever particular item you're trying to buy? And we're not really gamifying it in such a way that are we trying to increase our, we can say, spiritual fulfillment, or our fulfillment with dealing with other humans, or the betterment of...
I mean, based, Stephen. Not bad.
Certain hobbies or passions. So I think that gamification can be a good thing. It just has to be used in a positive way. And I would hope that, I guess, in this festival and in the future, we talk about better ways to play the games of our lives so that we're reaching some deeper sense of fulfillment, and we're not just chasing the dragon of consumerist success.
You don't want to chase the
Thank you
dragon.
very much, Stephen. And Zizek, over to you. Do we need to eradicate the relentless gamification of life?
It doesn't matter if we need or not, we cannot. Because I think that existential philosophers like to emphasize mortality, ultimate limit, but I think that human life is, on the one hand, mortal and so on, but always accompanied, it's part of our symbolic order we dwell in, by something that I cannot but call undeadness. And here the game enters. Undeadness in the sense of you act as if you can return to it, do it again, and so on. So all human identity is based on the difference between the two deaths, the biological death and the symbolic death. I will not lose time, just give you an example of the most radical. It appeared in modernity well before video games, and it reached its high point with video games. Already if you read it, I didn't, it's too boring, but some people, the sad Justine Juliet. how when Justine, I think, it's tortured, raped again and again, but as it were in the next scene, she appears beautiful as before, and she always, as a victim, can restart her life. Now you will say, what has this to do with our today's experience? Isn't the same when I was a child, I don't know what they watch today, I watched those Tom and Jerry cartoons. Did you notice the same logic? Tom or Jerry get smashed by a car, cut into slices, and it goes on. In the next scene, he is already here. So it's this idea that as if you have, it's here that game begins for me. You have your direct life, but when you start to act as if this direct life, as if you can return to 0 point and then start again. So that the real loss, death, is the second death. And this is in the, I played them years ago, now my son is playing them, he's more intelligent, the primitive early video games where it was like, usually it was, you have 5 lives or 10 lives, you are shot down, you can begin again and so on. Again, what I wanted to emphasize is that this difference between the two deaths, this opens up the space for a game. And it's not simply, I will conclude immediately, not simply that on the top of our...
So is he making a distinction between like Destiny or Girl? Thanks for the donation. So is he making the distinction that there's the symbolic death, which is actually like the death of the symbolic order or your identity within the symbolic order, which is essentially the death of like... which isn't like it's not the same as the death of the real, and if anything it comes from the real, and then there is the real death, and in between these two is the game, where it's like essentially at what point, like how far can you push the symbolic order towards your own enjoyment until it essentially annihilates you metaphysically. I think that's kind of what he's getting at, where it's like essentially you start you essentially either embrace, like you essentially of kind of destroy yourself, but not in an identity way, but in like a genuine, like as in you will not be able to reproduce an identity again. In the same way as if you've expelled all of your lives in a video game, as long as you stay within the game, your lives are infinite. But if you go too close to, if you fly too close to the sun, you'll essentially annihilate yourself metaphysically. And that would be like a way of like maybe sort of hitting like a metaphysical, or rather like a sort of I want to say that it doesn't even have to be death. I'm willing to bet that he doesn't even mean death just as essentially dying biologically. I'm willing to bet that he means death in the same way that like Blanchot talks about death. Can you die but not die? So like when he's talking about like I don't know if that would be symbolic death for him though, or whether he's going to say that there is this spiritual death, this metaphysical death, which is like where one goalpost is, and then you've got this symbolic death where there's another goalpost, and then we have the life that we live in between them. I don't know. Let's see how we go.
Our mortality, you have another level where you are almost immortal. It's almost the opposite, that the game allows you to treat your real life as one of virtual multiplicities where you can go back and start again. So I am all for gamification. Good and evil, I don't care. Give me more of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our... Oh, you have one more
you
point.
You are right. You remember my old joke, some of you may know it, this is how language works. You know how I joined the applause before? I played the Stalinist game. This is a big topic. Look at speeches by both types of bad guys. Hitler, the fascist leader, when he gets, of course, the thunderous applause at the end, he just receives the applause. A Stalinist leader, even Stalin, he gives a speech, everybody applauds. What does the Stalinist leader, check it up on YouTube, do? He stands up and joins the applause. Why? Because the idea is, I'm like you, which makes him even worse. I'm just one of the servants of the people we all serve. That
I was going to say you're applauding something higher than yourself. It's as if it's not that me you're applauding. I am the embodiment of the people. Fuck, I hate the Communist Party. I truly hate the communists. Ideologically far superior to the fascists. But like evil. So evil, man.
higher dimension that you mentioned before. Sorry. It will not happen again.
Or will it?
Yes, of course not.
Let's go on to
Stephen's
the first
not gonna
theme
get a
of
word in
today.
Edgeways, is he? Bless him, Destiny's never going to get a word in Edgeways.
Today's debate. I'd like to kick off with you, Stephen, on this question of sort of clarifying the terms of the discussion. You know, what is a game, and is life one? Is life a game?
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems like we all agree that life is a game, so there's not going to be any screaming back and forth, I guess.
But what do we mean by game?
Yes.
What do we mean by game? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess in the simplest of sense, I would say that a game is something that has a particular.
He just yells at him, ask this question. You're asking the wrong question. He's like, we're really not going to scream at each other. Instantly screams at him.
Set of rules, and then has a particular goal. Which, I mean, I guess if you believe in the laws of physics and causality, arguably everything in existence follows this pathway. I think that when it comes to what was it? Repeat the prompt. He threw me off.
What is a game, and is life one, according to how you define it? Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that life is definitely a game. I think that the negative connotation of the game part of life comes from the fact that games are seen as competitions. And I think that the important part of realizing that life is a game is that everybody is playing a multitude of games at any different time. Some of these games, all of us can win, and some games are going to be competitions between other people where we can't all win.
See, I don't like that as alone. It's not just about who's playing what and who's winning what, but who writes the rules of the game, man. Like, think a little bit more Wittgensteinian. Yeah, we're all playing numerous games, but who's writing the rules of the game? Who's controlling the ideology? In order for the essentially who dictates the viable rules and the illegal rules, and even the implicit boundaries of what is a socially appropriate way of engaging in the game. That's the way I would have liked to see. I'd like to see this.
So life is a game, but there are competitions that we should strive to do well in. Like you could argue that a game that you can win is being a father, having some children, having a good life with your family. That this is a type of game that every individual, well, every father and then every mother can play and win without necessarily having to be in competition with other people. There can also be other types of games where, quite literally, we're
You could go co-op versus competitive, you mean? It could be friendly versus, like, ranked, I don't know.
competing in, say, like an athletic event where there can only be some winners. But I think even within those games, you might lose to other people. You can have personal accomplishment or success where you outperform. You do, say for track and field, you run faster than you ran before, or you jumped higher than you jumped before. So, yeah.
So just, so you mentioned competition as kind of one of the critiques of that perspective, but maybe another one would be to do with the levity involved in gaming, the idea that, you know, well, if everything's a game, everything's just a bit of fun, which is fine, I guess, if you're making an individual decision about something like trying to play at being the best dad, which would be in your personal interest. But is it really a game when you're running, I don't know, a mine where people's lives are at risk?
Is it really only in your personal interest? And again, like, you know, is like, why are you saying, like, is it bad to have, like, is there really levity in a game? Like, I don't know if you've played games before, but to say that, like, games aren't taken seriously, I think you haven't played enough games to say that, like, games are taken too seriously. Like, humans don't approach games atypically with, it doesn't matter if I lose. No. Like the way that humans approach games atypically is when you find someone is in the game, they are in the game. Like I've seen some nerd rage that would like curl your hair, man.
tasks, or is it really a game when you're sort of in charge of, intensive care and, people's lives are at stake? I mean, is game the right way to frame every aspect of life, or some things maybe shouldn't be viewed as a game?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. It's very interesting for me because my background was playing literally games professionally. And one of the things that people would say, it was very funny, you could be competing online and somebody wins or loses a game, people get very upset and somebody go, well, it's only a game. But if you're a professional game player, well, it's not only a game, it's also my job, Right. And I'm sure for some people that play,
Let's be frank, right? He took it seriously before he even got professional. Like, that's how he got professional. Like, the fact that he took the game seriously is what made, well, it's not the only thing that made the difference. Obviously, the skill and, obviously the fact that he's actually good at the game, But it's the fact, if he wasn't taking the game seriously to begin with, he would never have become a professional gamer, right? Like, he enjoys games.
Sports professionally, you also hear similar things. It's not just a game. This is, how I live my life. At the end of the day, I feel like ultimately, this might be a boring answer, but I feel like it's kind of a semantic question. Like, you could argue, should saving a life be, part of a game? But I mean, triage is quite literally, well, I have a certain amount of resources and I have to allocate it to people based on some set of criteria that I develop. And I mean...
And the StarCraft player kicks in, not enough resources. Not enough Vespian gas. That's just... Except you replace Vespian gas with oxygen. He doesn't have enough, what do they call it? It's not enough workers.
There are literally games that do that thing, and in real life we also do it as well. I think one of the top selling games I think on Steam is literally called Euro Truck Simulator, which is where you drive a truck across Europe and you deliver goods and services and stuff. So
sounds riveting.
I don't know how people play. Well, I play a lot of dumb games myself, so. Like I said, when I talk about things, I try to remove a lot of the normative baggage. People will hear the word game and they instantly assume, oh, it's goofy or silly or stupid. But I mean, if you look in the animal kingdom, for instance, cats do a lot of cute little behaviors where they scrouch around, they jump around corners, and they play with their, they can either play with their human friends or their, mom and dad, and or their mom, that particular game is just a game that they're playing, but it prepares them for actual hunting in the future, right? So the game itself there is a preparation for something later on in life that satisfies the literal most important fundamental need to the creature, which is finding food. So yeah, I mean, in a way, everything is a game, but I probably wouldn't say it in a normal conversation because people get really mad when they hear that word. Yeah.
Well, Slavoj, do you get very mad when you hear that word? Do you agree with, you seem very shocked to have been brought into it. Stephen was suggesting that life is indeed a game, that we can look at it that way. Is that, I mean, you were saying you're for more games. How do you define it? Is it should we look at life in those terms?
Again, I agree with you. It's a semantic question, but I think, maybe I'm wrong, it is maybe at certain level more productive not to universalize game, but to set some minimal conditions which I must admit limit the notion of game to human symbolic universe. Game is something for me out of which you can step in.
He didn't like the bringing in the cat. That's what he didn't like. Funnily enough, I think that Destiny's right here. I think it's better to bring the cats in. Because I think that just saying that, it's a human symbolic... I mean, I get it. I know what he's saying. He's the symbolic in terms of human relates to a level of essentially the objectivity in language. But I think that what we're seeing is if anything, I think that Destiny's probably closer to the point in saying that the reason that we end up with the symbolic order in the first place is because reality is already gamified before we get there. It's that there are these categories which encourage identities to form and communication to be structured, and essentially social relations between various individual members of species to essentially bubble out of the ether in the first place. It's not like it just pops out of nothing. It's the reason that we create games in terms of a symbolic order is because they represent what was happening previously. That there is that it couldn't I don't want to talk about the imminency in Hegel, but it's imminent, right? It couldn't help but happen, and it's not just the fact that it's not just the fact that there was that, you know, it's this symbolic order and so on, and that, you know, cats can't partake. It's that, I think that misses the point. I think that humans might be able to recognize that symbolic order and be able to create a symbolic order which may even detach from the real symbolic order by, you know, essentially attributing essences. But in the negativity of reality is bubbling out these essences, is this communication which we are realizing in a very real sense.
In some sense, break the rules. And for me, in this sense, games are on the one hand cliches. And I love cliches.
An Apollyon dream. Yeah, probably. Maybe. I don't know. I do believe that the universe is ordered. I think that if anything, we're the Dionysians. I think at the point of language where you're saying, like, you know, I think they want to say language is this sort of the birth of the rule-based order. The rules existed before us. Language is the birth of the rule breakers, not just the structure itself.
Yes. My favorite quote from the big Hollywood, he was very progressive, Sam Goldwyn, producer. You know, when he got from his assistant tell him that in the press they said there are too many old cliches in your movies. You know how he answered? He sent a memo to his screenwriters, scenario writers, saying we urgently need more new cliches. The right answer. Okay, so what I want to say is this. I cannot emphasize this enough. Language is a game, not just in this general Wittgensteinian sense, but in a more specific sense that how is something truly new created? When you play the standard language game, you say something wrong, you made a mistake, and then instead of apologizing, you quickly invent a new sense to accommodate that mistake. So I think that all true spiritual, even I would say, progress comes through this. You do something wrong, and here, to insult you in a very friendly way, a French friend of mine claimed to...
Wait, who's he insulting? Is he insulting Destiny? Wait a minute.
Insult you in a very friendly way. A French friend of mine claimed to me, you see, this is cooking, kitchen as game, that why is French cuisine one of the great ones? Because it's based on failure. You were
He's insulting the French. Oh no, that's fine, mate. You're in Europe right now. You can insult the French as much as you like. If you're in Europe, you can insult the French as much as you like. That's the rules. Doesn't even matter where you are. Any other place in Europe. Basically, if you're not in France, you can insult the French. That's how it works.
Your ancestors. You were doing cheese. The cheese got rotten. You were lazy. But they say, my God, a new kind of cheese, Roquefort or what?
Tastes great.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you were doing wine. The wine, whatever happened to him, became then, oh my God, let's call this champagne, you know, and so on. I think this is the most productive way, the true...
No, especially if you're in France. Absolutely, actually, yeah.
Creativity is not, I invented up something new, but precisely this, to quickly change.
Yeah, what he's really saying is that, like, if the rules of the game are to represent our enjoyment, and so, like, there's this sort of like relationship to reality, and it's what he's really saying is that there is this. It's kind of saying that the game itself, when we accidentally break the rules of the game, we shouldn't look at it like, oh no, the game is over, we need to start again. This is all such a like game over, that's it. But rather like. Should the game itself accommodate this? Would this not make for a better game? And that, I think, is more about how a question of authorship of the game, rather than essentially just playing the game. Remember, you're the author of the game as much as the player in the game.
Already late Wittgenstein was obsessed with this problem, to quickly change the rules so that an apparent mistake allows you to open up a new higher level of gaming. And I don't know enough about animals. If you know very briefly, can I ask you a question which concerns this? According to my psychoanalytic Lacanian dogma, but I would like to be refuted. Animals can do many things. They can play games. They can even, in some behavioral sense, lie. Like we know of rabbits who pretend.
Oh, he's already a step ahead of Destiny. He's affirming animals can do things that Destiny doesn't.
To jump in that direction, but they really jump into another direction. But can they lie with the truth itself? Let us say that I say something, I know you will take it, because that's our cliche. Not literally, but then I take it literally. You know what I mean? That you tell the truth, counting that the other will take this as a lie. Like the model of this is, I love it, you know, one of the famous Marx Brothers jokes. This man looks as an idiot and talks as an idiot, but this shouldn't deceive you, this man is an idiot. Can animals do this? Tell the truth with the intention to lie more effectively? I don't know.
Well, we may well need a whole other debate on animals and truth telling, but I'm gonna bring Lisa in at this point, if that's okay. Lisa, first you want to come back on this idea of obviously your understanding of the meaning of game, but also pick up, I guess, on something that Slavoj was touching on, which I guess is that, you know, is there a kind of positive perspective on viewing life as a game, that potentially the playfulness that we bring to games produces progress in some cases, right? We playfully mess around with something and discover that actually it produces a great new food, or, you know, a great new drink, or whatever else it may be. Or do you have maybe some reservations around perceiving life as a game?
So the notion of a game has as an assumption that there are set and replicable rules or laws to the game. And equally that there is a predictable endpoint within a narrow range of possibilities.
Yes.
Both of those preconditions rely on the perception of radical.
She's going to be Eastern, isn't she? She's going to essentially reject the idea that there is a knowable existence. That's what she's going to do. She's just going to go straight up like, oh yeah, but all this illusory nonsense, who cares, you know?
Human control. Replicable rules and a fixed terminus, a fixed endpoint within a narrow constraint of options. So I'd like...
No, but the fixed terminus, the fixed endpoint, I think Slavoj was already referencing, was death itself. So it's in between death itself and a symbolic death. Do we have a game? We have the possibility of, you know, essentially you break the rules, or like, you know, you break the structure of your individuality, the structure of your identity, you die. But it's not a death in which you can't respawn from. You can remake yourself, you can rebuild yourself, you can recover. This is the point of therapy. This is the point of reimagining yourself, and it's a metaphysical freedom of being in our form. But then there is the sort of undeniable reality of the end of human life, which is just the fact that we are absolutely going to die. But she's just going to go full on like, but it's all illusory. It's because none of this exists.
With you,
I get that vibe.
60-second walk into another view of how life's built. 60 seconds?
Please.
Thank you. I'm going to invite you to clear out your inner space with 3 breaths. Have the option to close your eyes and walk you.
No. All right. So what we're going to do, clear out our inner space with 3 breaths. Okay, everyone?
You, if you wish, an invitation through a 60-second thought visualization. Okay? I invite you to close your eyes. I invite you to take 3 breaths. 1, 2, 3. I invite you to think of a time where you wanted something so badly in the game of life that you researched it. You strategized. You had your tactics. A plus B plus C, that red door was yours. That job, that university, him, her, them, to say yes, to live there. That red door was yours. A, B, C, you'd done it right. You go for the handle, and it's stuck. And it seems untenable in this game of life, 99% certainty, because you had done A plus B plus C. You might kick the door, you might be shocked, you might even be depressed. But only because the red door was stuck, you had no choice. You turned 40, 80, 110 degrees, and there was a wide open, shining yellow door. You may have said that yellow doors don't exist. You've never thought of yellow doors. On the other side is someone more right for you, is a job that made you feel alive, is a mentor who brought you in a whole new direction. It was not what you had wanted. It was better than what you had wanted. And as you sit back and you look at that stuck red door, the hairpin turn that brought you to the wide open yellow door that has everything to do with who you are and where you are today, was anyone standing there at the hairpin turn? A parent, a grandparent, someone you met for 2 minutes at the tea or coffee shop, someone on the bus, a trail angel who pointed you to the yellow door. And finally now, as you sit back, stuck red door, hairpin turn, trail angel pointing you to the yellow door. How really are the most important parts of our lives found? Is it narrowly through strategy and tactics, or do those certainly have their place in preparation? But are the most finest directive parts of our lives some type of dialogue, not with walking an inert stage, but in a dynamic dialogue with a dynamic guiding force in and through all life?
Okay, I can get behind that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm 100% with that. I can get, as a Christian, I understand. Like, I can get that. I can get behind that. I don't think that goes anything against like games or anything, though. I think that it's as if like what you're trying to say is like there is the game you believe you're playing, and then there's the game that God is playing with you. You know what I mean? Or like there is the game that God has set forth. Do you know what I mean? And like I could get behind that, but then like that, if anything, that's just like, like should really like side quests. Like, yeah, that's it. No, but that's it. Like like you've got to just like. Fair enough. I don't have any problems with that. There is like there is the game that goes. There's the game that's in the game. And you're playing a game in a game, but don't lose sight of the fact that there is a higher game, a bigger game that's being played with you, right? Like I mean, I'm 100% behind that. I have no problem with that, right? The way she told it, Trail Angel, really? We're gonna use Trail Angel as a term. You couldn't even have just said, like, Guardian Angel. Like, you know what I mean? Like, okay.
Is it possible you've been on a quest, a spiritual path all along? Sitting now way back?
She's loving this moment, isn't she? Like, she's loving getting people to close their eyes and everything. She's loving this.
Stuck red door, hairpin turn, trail angel, wide open yellow door. Where in your road of life is the force?
I like how Destiny's now got his eyes open and just like Zizek. Zizek's such a fucking good bloke. Look at him. Like I think he's being the good faith participant, and I think he's approaching the symbolic order. He's like, this is sort of a religious symbolism. I need to see where this goes.
Force is the source, universe, God, Hashem, Allah, that which is in us, through us, and around us. Is this force in the trail angel and in you hearing the trail angel? Is the force in the open yellow?
Oh my God! Like this is a DMT trip at this point. This isn't a spiritual experience. I mean, it is, but
door. and even the stuck red door. So life has times for strategy and preparation, but life, perhaps in your own path, is alive and has a force of its own.
You know, I think, you know what? I actually really appreciate that. I think she's done a good job. I'm not going to lie. I think she's brought something here that, one, just makes the conversation way more dynamic and more interesting. Like, this would be like far less interesting if she wasn't here. I just want to point out that it's so much like, but also I do think she's got a point. I think she's trying to say that there's a game, like, you know, the game, almost that the game's playing you back. Do you know what I mean? Like, as if like, don't let your pride and your hubris get in the way of like the fact that there is a force at play that you're not in control of. And you know what? I really appreciate that. I think that's actually, you know, really good. Yeah, the game is the one letting you make games for the overall end from which is predetermined. Like that. I like that. I mean, I'm a Christian, so of course I like that. But how's your trail angel? My trail angel's great.
Wow, thank you very much. Well, that brings us nicely on to our second theme, which is whether we should see games as furthering inequality. And I want to pick up on that with you, actually, Lisa. If we sort of stay with the idea that, you know, there are rules in life aren't replicable, actually, and that therefore this idea of a game which would require set rules isn't fully applicable. What are some of the dangers then in seeing life as a game in that context? I mean, one of the obvious ones might be feeling massively disappointed if you feel that you've played the game and the door hasn't opened. I'm you know, thinking of some of the frustrations. Is there a connection between kind of incels who play a lot of games and also are very...
Don't point at Destiny. Destiny's not an incel. Like, look, the man might be a lot of things, but he's not an incel.
Frustrated that they think they've played the game of masculinity and it hasn't delivered on the sex that they apparently are owed. We'll come back to that another time. But
what? just a feminist jab there, wasn't it? That was 100%.
But on that, so should we, you know, are there some downfalls then that we should be aware of in thinking of it in those terms?
So the game metaphor is so deeply entrenched in the air and water of post-industrial global culture that life itself can look like a game. Now, I am all for games, and my son admires you. You walk on water to my son. And still, we have never seen coming out of our shared pandemic as elevated rates of addiction, depression, and the pandemic in my beloved Gen Z is not COVID and it is not cancer. The pandemic in my beloved Gen Z, my students at Columbia and Barnard, is suicide. The rate of death by suicide rivals the rate of death by auto accidents. Why? Because the notion that I played it well, I wanted it, I didn't get it. COVID took away my graduation. COVID took away that which I had planned and controlled and strategized. There are limits to superimposing the metaphor of the game. And after every great time of suffering, after every plague, and you lead the way, has been a renaissance, has been an enlightenment. We are shedding the overextension of the game metaphor, presupposing radical human control, to an opening of a deeper seat of being, an awakened awareness, our birthright. In this new rising renaissance, we are going to be free. And still, there's plenty of time to play a good game.
Thanks, Lisa. Well, that's...
Okay, that one went well over me. What did she just say? Like, I don't feel like I gave that enough attention to understand what the hell was just said there. Like, you can't half listen to her. Like, this is all allegorical. I have to reinterpret every single word she just said. And I have no idea what she just said. I'm not sure. We'll get back to that.
Where I'd love to bring you back in then, Stephen, on that one. So Lisa's obviously pointed out some of her concerns with the impact of the gamification of life on individual psych.
Like, I got the impact point. I got the, like, you know, this is, I got everything up to, like, there was a point where it just went, like, and it just became a string of nouns. Like, it went from being like a coherent sentence talking about what was going wrong to a string of nouns. And yeah.
Ecology. Do games therefore have this sort of toxic dimension to them? Should we be concerned about their impact on inequality?
Yeah, I think what I said earlier was there are many games that we can be playing, and I think the most important games are the ones where we're kind of in competition with ourselves, vying for things that aren't necessarily shared with other people or that other people are competing for. I don't see any reason why, for instance, every person couldn't reach some baseline proficiency in mental health, in physical health and strength, and even level of educational attainment. It doesn't even have to be formal college. In the pursuit of some hobby or passion. Like, these are all types of games that people can play that can enrich their lives in a plethora of ways. I think that the issue that we run into, especially in the Western world, is a lot of the games that we're looking to play are in competition with other people. There's a saying that is it jealousy is the thief of joy, or like the idea that basically you can have something, you could be nice and feel good about it, but then as you see that your neighbor has something bigger or better, now all of a sudden you don't feel good about the thing you have. You know, you have the iPhone 12, he's got the iPhone 13, you have the Mustang, he's got the Bugatti, that all of a sudden the things that you have are no longer good anymore.
But, like, just to sort of spiral into her take, is it not that you've tried to engage in that game, and when you see that game sort of collapse beneath you, and, you know, Zizek might see this as like a sort of symbolic death. Now, you've failed the game, you've died, you've been unable to achieve what you want, or you've completed it, and you've realized that you were unhappy in that scenario anyway. Does that not essentially lead you to a point in which you start playing another game, or you engage in games in a way that's different, and you start playing a game which is organized and coordinated by a game which, you know, this is only this is a side quest, or this is one of those little games within a game. Like you're playing Sonic the Hedgehogs, and you're looking after those little baby things, like in Sonic the Hedgehog's Adventure 2 Battle, and you're looking after those, you're hatching the eggs and stuff, and then you realize, wow, I'm bored as shit, and then you go back to the actual game. Like, is it not sort of like that, where you realize that, oh, okay, wait a minute, maybe this competitive mindset that I've got in, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of playing Call of Duty. I'm sick of playing, I'm sick of playing League of Legends. This community is absolutely toxic. I hate all of you. Why did I play this game? I'm going back to platformers. I am much happier there. Like, is it not like that? Like, for example, I knew a guy that, I met him on a night out. I was at Weatherspoons, and, you know, I'm a talkative person as it is, right? So I'm just talking to this bloke. He's behind the bar, and he's telling us, he's like, oh, you know, I've got a master's degree in, like, because we're talking about, like, I can't remember, whatever. And he's like, oh, I've got a master's degree in law. And he was like, I was a practicing lawyer. And he's like, I realized I was absolutely depressed. Like, I hated my life. And so I thought to myself, I'm like, well, what did I actually enjoy doing? He's like, I enjoyed being a bartender. He's like, so I'm a bartender again. And I know a night out at Weatherspoons sounds well. I know it's where you start the night usually, but, like, the drinks are cheap enough, man. You can go there. Like, Weatherspoons is open till 2 a.m. here. But anyway, but he was like a bartender. And it's just like, oh, like, I get it. Like, he's just like, he's quit playing one game, and he's went back to see that, he's went and seen the yellow door, like, as she would say. And I think, I think she's got a point there. And I think Destiny, like, is being right in saying that there are good games and there are bad games. But to say it's good and bad in the first place, I think is missing her point. I think she's saying that there's ends which you think are good and you think are bad, and these might be hypothetical ends, but there's a categorical end at the end of it all anyway. There is this telos, there is this higher goal from which you are trying to achieve in your life, and through these games, it is working upon you. And, that can even be at the point of just the recognition of your own unhappiness.
I think that the games, as I said earlier, the games that we play seem to be increasingly more consumeristic, and a consumer game is often measured by the actual value dollar amount of the things that you're acquiring. And in that sense, it's very easy to compare from A to B. Is my house worth more than his house? Is my car worth more than his house? Am I in the top 10%, 5%, or 1% of earners?
Is my car worth more than his house? Well, that's Destiny's flexing a little bit there. Is my car worth more than his house?
I think that if you're stuck on playing these games where you're in relentless competition with other people, then necessarily you're going to have winners and losers. And necessarily there's going to be a big chunk of losers that are going to feel like losers. And it's going to inhibit even their ability to navigate life and play the individual games that I think they should be more focused on. So I don't think games necessarily have to create inequality. There's only going to be so many winners in a given video.
Is Destiny arguing for single player games? He's like, we got too much competition. We need more single player games, more story based. Is that what he's saying? Because like in reality, like it's not like that. We need like more cooperative games, or even like, you know, realizing that these games that we're the ones writing them. That when we're playing them, we're the ones dictating the rules. And I think Zizek was sort of pointing that direction as well. He's like, remember that, like, you know, when you're making the cheese, when you're making the wine, the only like you're the one that's dictating what is supposed to be the wine and the cheese. Like, you know, there's a hard point in which you go, all right, this is actually revolting. That's the real, right? That's something that you can't avoid. But in between the real and the symbolic, there is this space to play with. And he's like, so we are playing, when we're playing games, we're not just playing games, we're playing games with games, ultimately.
Video game tournament, or in a given tennis tournament, or in a given NFL or NBA league. But I don't see any reason why we, you know, can't all win at, for instance, not being homeless, or for instance.
Am I stupid if you didn't understand what the lady said? 100%. That's how it works. Like, if you don't understand what the shamanistic guru said, then you just need to go home, Rob. What can I say? Like, either get good enough to understand the truth of the shamanistic, I don't know what she is. Yeah, you should quit. No, don't quit life, please, Rob. Don't take that seriously. I had no idea what you said at one point either. Yes, I'd love another drink. Can I have a quadruple Jim Beam and Coke, please? Thank you. With ice. Yes, somewhere like that. Like more. Yes, somewhere, but yes.
Having a person that loves you, or having a good relationship with our friends and family.
Thank you, Stephen. Savoy, I want to bring you in on this because obviously the games that we're playing are exist within a context, right? In the context of global capitalism, and the rules of those games are still largely determined, not all of them, I'm sure we can find exceptions, but by and large on this idea of competition. And are they not therefore kind of entrenching the sort of ideological level of haves and have-nots, winners and losers? Are they actually not like a bit of a sort of social lubricant to justify the sort of inequalities that we find within global capitalism in that sense?
Yes, but first, a very brief theoretical point. I agree with some of my friends, not fully, but like Varoufakis, Jody Dean and so on, who claim that what is happening today is that liberal competitive capitalism is already approaching the end. I think it is meaningful to say, although the term is maybe too radical, it's not as simple as that we are entering the era with new feudal masters. These ultra-rich corporations are owned by individuals. How did Bill Gates become so rich? He monopolized our...
Because he's the best. Did you not understand that, Slavoj? He's just the best.
Our commons. If we want to communicate, we have to go through his products. So it's not profit in the sense of exploiting his workers, it's rent. We are paying him a rent. We are paying Jeff Bezos a rent, and so on and so on. So this is a new phase, but let me go to the basic.
Is he basically saying this is neo-feudalism? I want
in the sense of exploiting his workers, it's rent. We are paying him a rent. We are paying to communicate. We have to go through his products. So it's not profit in the sense of exploiting his workers. It's rent.
Yes.
We are paying him.
Yes. Slavoj, 100%. Oh, I love that.
rent. We are paying Jeff Bezos rent, and so on and so on. So this is a new phase, but let me go to the basic point about games. I also agree with both of you got it correctly that there is no spontaneous tendency towards equality, inequality in games, but they are contradictory. In what sense?
Okay, is he going to bring up the master-slave dialectic? Come on, son. I believe in you, Slavoj. Bring up who's writing the games, how much control we have over the authenticity of the games. You know, that's the sort of thing. Like, I'd like to see, like, sort of equalized more. But I think I'm not going to lie, the only one, like, I'm really shocked to say this, like, so far, like, that Shaman lady has had one of the best points. Like, I can't believe it. Like, the Shaman lady is so far leading the pack with the sort of like the sort of higher level. I mean, I don't think she meant to say it was a game, but like there is the author of the game of you making the games almost. Like there is a greater like teleological destiny. Yeah, there's the true self, Maximo, 100%, and it's like it's so teleological. Right now, I want will Zizek channel his inner Hegelian here and compete with that and say, yes, but in order to reach that telos, we must first seize our own authenticity back to where we can dictate our own virtue so that we can fall in line with this higher self. That would be cool. I would like that.
First, there is for me a strange psychological fact that often you cannot say something in reality, but if it's put in the terms of a game, even theater play, you can do it. For example, the great classic Jane Austen's Mansfield Park. A young couple is in love. They are too constrained to say this openly. But they select a Shakespeare piece, I think, where they, in the game, but they can say it. So this is what Jacques Lacan meant, I think, when he says this, that the truth has the structure of a fiction. And I deeply believe that, in this sense, masks are never just masks. When we adopt a mask to play a game, we can bring out there something that we are not ready to confront in our so-called real life. In this sense also, let me give you another example. I'm ashamed to mention it. It's so stupid, but you saw for weddings and the funeral that moment when Hugh Grant declares love. You see, he does it in the sense of, he's stuttering, repeating himself, but precisely
I need to go back. I missed too much of that there, so we're going back. We're going back, guys.
Also, let me give you a mask to play. Select a Shakespeare piece items of towards equality, inequality. We go to the basic point about games. I also agree with both of you got it correctly that there is no spontaneous tendency towards equality, inequality in games, but they are contradictory. In what sense? First, there is for me a strange psychological fact that often you cannot say something in reality, but if it's put in the terms of a game, even theater play, you can do it. For example, the great classic Jane Austen's Mansfield Park. A young couple is in love. They are too constrained to say this openly. But they select a Shakespeare piece, I think, where they, in the game, but they can say it. So this is what Jacques Lacan meant, I think, when he says this, that the truth has the structure of a fiction.
I think that's based. It's almost as if, like, in reality, the utterance of itself is impossible. In reality, you require the symbolic order in order to express the essence of the existence in which you're experiencing. Because the existence you're experiencing is a negative, right? It's a sheer being, and so you must basically destroy it and remake it in its own image for it to be comprehensible, almost, to be communicable, to be comprehensible. And I think I like that.
And I deeply believe that in this sense, masks are never just masks.
Yeah.
When we adopt a mask to play a game, we can bring out there something that we are not ready to confront in our so-called real life. In this sense also, let me give you another example. I'm ashamed to mention it. It's so stupid, but you saw for weddings and the funeral that moment when Hugh Grant declares love. You see, he does it in the sense of, he's stuttering, repeating himself, but precisely through this apparent breakdown of the game, he gets his message through.
Yeah, man, like 100%. Like if it's kind of like if you are approaching a girl or something like that, and then you start like you were really nervous and you're showing like visible signs of, let's say, like your inability to communicate. That communicates more to the girl than the actual act of you saying something. Like more is said in the absence of the words than in the words themselves. I love that. That's based.
Sometimes.
But that's a breakdown of the symbolic order, right? Like we're saying, like a breakdown of the game. And in the breakdown of the game, are we realizing the limits of the game itself? Like more clearly, we recognize what is being played. Like what role he is attempting to occupy is made more clear. In the same way that Hegel says, in order to have something, you have to be able to give it away. I think that when Sartre and like Being in Nothingness talks about how more clearly you can recognize someone's presence by their absence. It's the same sort of thing where you realize that actually I have a certain expectation. I have a certain belief structure, which maybe I wasn't even aware of. And from that, I can then, what is essentially transpiring in this scenario, specifically, like take the boy and the girl, is that he is trying to essentially play a game here, and that game is essentially to approach me to sort of, I don't want to say woo me because that sounds like a little bit cliche, but like to pursue a romantic interest. And so the game is a romantic one, and that's only made available to her because of his disposition. I think that's very clear. I think that's very interesting.
The failed game is the only way.
Somebody please find Pierre. Yes, John D.
To get the message through. That's why, incidentally, I hate male chauvinists who, when a woman reports to be raped, they say, but you see, she contradicted herself and so on. Sorry, but I would be very distrustful if a woman were to give totally perfect cold report on. Okay.
I think that's actually one of the I think that's such a base take as well. Like the point that, like, when you say that when someone, the rules of the game that we've constructed in relation to police reports expect a cold, rational agent and a victim to coexist, like simultaneously. Like the victim will occupy the stance of a cold, rational agent whilst not essentially being impacted by a rape. So she's supposed to give this cold account of being raped, but also having actually being what you're supposed to be reporting is essentially the traumatic event. And I do think that is a contradiction in the way that we've formulated the game. And I think that's only made available, I think, when even through the game, like we've made that available because we're like, wait a minute, like, someone like Zizek is pointing out, this is a symbolic order falling apart. We've perverted the game. We've perverted it away from reality. And I think what he's sort of doing is saying that we have these sort of points in which the game sort of falls apart. And it's at this point in which we gain the opportunity of analysis. Because, like, for Zizek, it's all about analysis. It's all about this sublime objective ideology, this thing behind you or above, which is sort of like what she was saying in terms of structuring reality, but hers was more metaphysical and maybe more divine. His is more psychoanalytic. He's like, this thing is structuring reality in relation to your to what you perceive as good and bad and so on, which again I think has religious connotations, but I don't think Zizek goes that way. So there is this overall end goal you're seeking, and when this all starts falling apart, when the rules of the game starts falling apart, then what we turn back to is this sort of object of what we can't say. This the emptiness is what we analyze. We start looking at how are we engaging with the nothingness that is there. Is it causing us, for example, a distress? Is it causing us angst? Is it causing us to look at it with a newfound optimism? Like, what is it that why we're approaching it that way? And then we'll start to uncover the sort of hidden bounds, or the sort of unutterable bounds of the game that we're playing. The aspect of the game which is playing us.
I wouldn't discard it, but you know what I think? Sometimes the truth can only articulate it through failures and so on and so on. So the last thing I want to emphasize this. I don't believe in going deep into.
What do I mean by the nothingness? I mean the part in which the symbolic order of reality is collapsed. So like as if the rules of the game which allow you to interpret reality are falling apart, and now you're left with the what Hegel would say, like the infinite of being, right? Like, because it doesn't matter if it's infinite being or nothingness, because they're both the same to us. They're incomprehensible. They're too much. We need to break it down. We need to compartmentalize it, like make it into smaller little sects, because otherwise it's non-communicable, even to ourselves. So you're left with the absurd. Yeah, 100%. And at that point, but it's not truly absurd, Em. That's the beautiful thing about it. It's not, because what is there, it's not that we are looking into a genuine abyss, right? It's not an actual nothingness. It's structured, but it's structured in a way that resists us. It's structured at the point in which what can't I understand, or what can't I think about, or what is absent here gives you knowledge about reality which you weren't able to achieve through a pure positive analysis.
To your inner self. Sorry to be brutal, if you go deep into it, you find deep shit there, I claim. Monstrous fantasies and so on. I believe that the only way to overcome yourself is to identify.
I think that this is beautiful in some respects, because more Tilo, it's not like, like if you try to like introspect into the soul, it's like you're going the wrong way. You don't look, the soul doesn't look into itself by essentially turning inward. The soul looks into itself by looking up, by seeking God. And I think that's the way that Zizek is approaching this.
With your mask. Just to conclude, that I don't drag on, my favorite movie here, Rossellini, you should see it, you can get it on YouTube, from 1960, I think, with Vittorio De Sica, General della Rovere. De Sica plays a poor guy who is caught, it's still occupied Italy, caught by the Nazis, and since he looks exactly like General della Rovere, a big name of resistance, they tell him, we killed della Rovere, but resistance that we have in prison don't know this. So go there, pretend that you are General della Rovere, and people will confide in you, and you will tell us that. You can guess what is the ending. He identifies so much to his role that he is ready to die. He doesn't say anything.
He becomes the general. That's so based, man. That is so based. It's like upside down Lord of the Rings, isn't it? Where like he adopts like the ring of power, but the ring of power is one of goodness. That's so good. That's like upside down ring of Gyges. I love it. I love it. The power itself purifies his desire. Oh yes. Yes, more.
He's shot publicly as General della Rovere. In this sense, I am for good
So base.
alienation. Who cares about his real self, a poor beggar, and so on? In this complete identification with another, you can find freedom, but also horror. Did you see with Jim Carrey, his best film, I think, did you see The Mask?
The Mask, his best film's The Mask. I don't know, man. I mean, actually, that's a good one. That is a good one. But I don't know, Jim. I really enjoyed Bruce Almighty. I love Bruce Almighty. Like Ace Ventura. What are those? Liar, man. Liar. How could you like Fun with Dick and actually? I fucking love Jim Carrey. Oh, I fucking love Jim Carrey.
Where he is completely free, but nightmare comes out. This complete freedom to do what you want, he experiences it as a...
No, like you could have look, Jim Carrey, if you're gonna go for that, like this complete freedom to do what you want, what you should have done is Yes Man. He goes from the neurotic Yes Man, exactly, Jonty, right? Like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Okay. Jim Carrey should have an Oscar. I think it's an actual travesty that Jim Carrey. Anyway, right, okay. But Yes Man, The Truman Show. Oh God. Oh my God. Okay, yeah, but I think Yes Man would probably be the best for this, right? Because we'll have the man who is the neurotic rule follower who does everything in his life as he's supposed to, and so embraces a kind of hysteria. You know, he embraces the yes. I'm gonna fulfill everything. I'm gonna say yes to everything, and he goes through it, and he only to realize the hysteria itself is not enough, and so has to return back to the structure of his life, but in such a way as he retains the enjoyment, but brings it back into the sort of rule following structure of his life. That I think would have been the better film to reference here.
As a nightmare. So in this more precise sense, I think that first there is something liberating in games and cliches. Can you imagine how horrible life would have been if you were to tell just the truth sincerely without hypocrisy? There is no life without hypocrisy. Hypocrisy gives me, and it works. That's a game. I will conclude. Don't be afraid. I know.
I'm definitely taking you to theme 3.
Evil French spirit. I see it. Yeah. Look, I meet you, let's say, or you on the street, and I say, I'm so glad to meet you. What if in my mind, as it's probably the case because I'm an evil guy, shit, why didn't I note you 1 minute earlier to go to the other side of the road? And we both know it. But nonetheless, although we know that this is mostly a hypocritical, empty forum, it works performatively as a sign of kindness. This is for me a good alienation. I hate people who open...
I like that he's turned psychological alienation from Marx on its head. There is a good form of alienation. There is a good alienation from the self. That's nice. That's nice.
Open themselves up, and I don't want to hear them. I mean, all the dirty deeds. We need hypocrisy. Sorry.
I love Zizek so much, man. He's like one of the best. Like, I absolutely love Zizek so much.
As a Stalinist.
Well, arguably, the brave new world we're entering may offer you more potentials for hypocrisy. So on that subject, we obviously so far have discussed the idea of gamification of life in the context where, you know, real life, I'm going to call it that, no offense intended, because...
like, the thing is that what we should do is talk about, like, this is where I think, has anyone in the chat seen the game? Has anyone in the chat either read the Red Dwarf novels, or which are actually great, by the way, or watched the series? Because if you've done that, then you should check out. There's a game in Red Dwarf called Better Than Life, right? In one of the episodes is called Better Than Life, where they put it on and they realize that they're stuck in Better Than Life. But in the book, it's fleshed out even more, and they get called like game heads. Right, and like this game is essentially a virus okay, which basically it alienates you from reality, but only to the point in it alienates you entirely from reality and convinces you that you're not in a game by fulfilling anything you want, to the point in which you can get out of the game at any point in time. Getting out of the game is no problem. You just have to want to leave. That's the beautiful thing about it, right? I think that they should have made them watch Red Dwarf's Better Than Life before they've got them in this conversation. Hello. And I think that, like, essentially the way I say that is that there is what you believe to be your good. There is this particularity of good. There is the, you know, your interests, your preferences. I've said this to Destiny like so many times, right? Like it's so much it actually hurts. So you have these like particular preferences, you know, as they appear to you. You have what you think you want, and then you have what you actually want. It's basically the experience machine for Robert Nozick, if anyone's seen anything like that about that. And the premise is that in order, like, the truth is you do want to leave, because if you didn't want to leave, you would die. If you don't leave, you die, and your enjoyment is going to cease. But most people don't realize they're stuck in the game. But even when you do realize you're stuck in the game, most people probably still won't want to leave, because the idea of a life outside of game of life, or the game of Better Than Life, is so distasteful to you after having experienced Better Than Life, you just don't want to leave. And I think that this is kind of where we're at, right? Like, many of the games we play. Yeah, I'll go and okay, yeah. I'll do that in the break. In the next 5-10 minutes. Yeah? Okay, cool. Okay, right. I'm gonna have to run to the shop in the break, so don't worry. Okay. And so we have this essentially this goal which we think we want, right? We have this preference, and then we have what we actually want, right? We have this desire to be connected with reality. We have to acknowledge the truth, but it's not enough to just acknowledge the truth. We have to want the truth. And the problem is that the games we play subvert us to the point in which we believe we don't even want the truth anymore, right? If you watch like something like the Lance Bush versus Richard Brown debate, you'll say something like, there are the truths that we think we want, that there is the truth that I may want, and then there's the truth I don't want to know. And it's like, no, like, even to understand that you don't want that truth, you have to know it. To see truth as instrumental and not necessary is the mistake. And I think that the problem is that we often think that the truth is alienating our pleasure. And that is like the psychotic impulse within well, when I say psychotic impulse, I mean like in a sort of Lacanian sense. We have this psychosis, this desire for our desire, to the point in which we break away from reality itself, and we'll basically circle jerk ourselves into oblivion, right? That's the problem with contemporary Western society. We're so hopped up on ourselves, of our creative powers, our technological sophistication, the modes in which we can please ourselves, that we've lost sight of anything bigger or more important, and to the point in which we're corroding our society, where we're not acknowledging genuine threats, whether it's climate change, zoological disease risk, whether it's the moral calamities that we're committing, you know, even towards animals, but also towards ourselves. We're not acknowledging the fact that we're consuming ourselves to death, that we're not challenging violations of our civil liberties, that we're allowing essentially market structures to tell us what we want, to the point in which we don't even know what we want anymore, but we won't do anything because of our essentially addicted state. And I think that's where we are as a society for today. And I think that and I think Better Than Life expresses why we're not simply walking out the door, why we're not making something better, because we just don't want it enough.
Understand, is the majority of our...
So, like, essentially, to bring this to a close, actually, like no spoilers or anything, right? Like, well, it is spoilers actually. So if you're interested in reading the book, just mute it and I'll give you a thumbs up. And then when it's done, I'll give you another thumbs up. So we're starting now. Spoilers now. Okay. So essentially, the way the story ends in Better Than Life is that the neurotic psychology, Rimmer's psychology, is so fucking neurotic that the game ends up imploding in itself. Like, he ends up losing his body. He's a hologram who gets his body back, only to lose it, have his wife cheat on him with his brother, finally get his wife back, to lose his body, not be able to make love to his wife, and then his body makes love to his wife without him. Because he's so neurotic, he won't even be able to make love to his wife. He can't have her. So, and he can never actually have any of the goods that he wants. So he imagines himself as this rock star, the greatest man alive, the richest man alive, only for it all to be out of reach because he's so neurotic, right? The game has created the most tragic existence. His own mind has betrayed him in this experience, and he realizes that, and then just starts destroying everyone's life around them because it's a shared game, and they realize that the only way they're going to solve this together is to walk out all together. That there's no way we can play a game with someone so neurotic, right? And so this is, I think, how we're going to get out of this. That ultimately the lower classes essentially have to basically, and I'm not saying a revolution, right? I'm not, because I don't think revolution works. And I'm not saying to break the game, leave the game in that sense, sort of force a sort of new game to be made, because what I want is co-authorship. What the lower classes have to do, not just the lower classes have to do, but like, you know, the downtrodden, is essentially make visible their suffering, to ruin everyone else's game with them, to go like, look, I'm sorry to say this, but this isn't a good game. This symbolic order isn't going to work anymore. This game isn't going to function. Because so long as I'm like this, you can't be like that. And I think that's the only way we're getting out. So, okay, I'll get back.
Experience and gamification is a sort of lens that we take on that, or gaming is part of that. But as we move into sort of the more virtual world, where some of us are adopting, obviously, personal personas online, where more and more time is spent as avatars, you know, with kind of the... I was going to use the word progress we're seeing with AI, but I'm going to put progress in inverted brackets on that. As the culture becomes increasingly virtual, will our lives actually become more and more like a game? And is that something we should be concerned at all about? Savoy, I'm back to you on that one, but I'm conscious that we do have
I'm
not
a
much
madman
time.
who talks too much. So
I will seek to rein you in on this one, so everyone else can come in too.
Okay, I will really try to be brief. First, just one idea. I think what will be the future and so on. Maybe you know more technically, but I know people who know people who know people who are really doing what? Wired brain. I wrote a book on it. Now I learned that it's really, we are coming to that. They already have machines which in a non-invasive way, literally, 80%, not 100%, when you think about something, they can reproduce it. Now, usually, as always with dangerous technological invention, they put a good spin of it. They say, you see, isn't it wonderful, that guy who is totally crippled, he will be able to move objects just by thinking about it. Yes, but it goes the other way around also. That they will be able to implant from outside things into you. This will be literally a game changer, literally. Like we will have even, I think, to redefine humanity in what, because the basic sense of our being human is whatever you think you are out there, I'm free in my mind. What if the machine gets access to this? So to conclude, I have a wonderful joke which I think fits perfectly the opposition between realism and game universe. Maybe some of you know it. A wonderful anecdote from World War I, when in 1917 or when things began to go worse for Germany and Austrian Empire. From German headquarters, they send a telegram from Berlin to Vienna to Austrians saying the situation on our part of the front is serious but not catastrophic. You can imagine what the Austrians answer. They said, on our part of the front, the situation is catastrophic but not serious. This is what games enable you to.
I love that. I love this guy's jokes. Like, I actually do. I know, Steve. This isn't Steven's sort of like place at all, man. Like, this would be me in my element. Like, this is where I need to be in life, right? Like, this is where I want to be. I think Steven is just like, sigh.
Take catastrophe in a non-serious way. And maybe, just maybe, this is a way to do it. Because I don't believe in this pragmatism. Look at the situation coldly and so on and so on. If you look at the situation coldly, then let's be very clear. The history is moving towards a new global war. Don't bullshit it.
Thank you.
Oh, fuck. Please, no. I think we do not want that, man. To be honest, I actually think that it doesn't look like it's moving to a new global war. I'm going to be frank. I don't think that it looks like it's moving to a new global war. I think it looks like it's moving to a new global war, but it isn't moving. What kind of war? Yeah, I mean, like, I think economic war, and I think there was like a CIA guy I was watching a while ago. He's got like, you've probably seen him all over the place. He's got like proper curly hair. He's like American, well, obviously CIA, and he's got his hair like back. I can't remember his name now. And he was basically saying, like, just because we're like, war evolves, like, we don't know what war's gonna look like. So he's like, we're moving. He's like, predictability. He's like, we are moving to another big war within the next few years. But most people, and he's like, basically, most people seem like they're going to be behind it. But it's what kind of war? He's like, just because you think we're in a, like, just because it's a war doesn't mean that you understand what the kind of conflict is going to be like. Conflict changes. Like, the war never changes. No, war always changes. That's the twisted thing. The only thing that stays the same is us, right? War changes constantly. How the war's fought, what the war's fought for, why, like, essentially the parties that are playing the war. The only thing that doesn't change is the fact that it's humans that are the ones that are fighting it. That's the truth of it, right? And when we look towards the way that, like, the global regime sort of bubbling into a point of conflict, with China and Russia and so on, it's not going the way in which, like, for example, like, the way in which people would expect war to go is just go hot straight away. We're in another kind of Cold War. But more than that, we're in an economic war. And we're in a war with a participant, with China, that is, like, believe it or not, like, if anything, that fairly... They don't think in such a way as to be so hot-headed. Like Russia, that they're unpredictable or a bit mental. They've always been that they're self-absorbed. That they've got egos out the arse. Like, that's just the sort of Russian condition. I'm sorry to say that. I know I met a Russian who's not like that, right? Like, and I sort of say I don't like the Russians because actually I think there's a lot of Russians who are sound as fuck, and I'm sorry about your government. And there's a lot of Russians who call out their government, like, or rather would like to, but like struggle to with the current regime. But the way in which the Russian sort of mindset is, and like the Eastern European mindset is, it's very much there's nothing higher than the self other than the state, and the way that they approach things is essentially a very much about this sort of, I think there is this neuroticism, but it's very much about like the motherland, and there's no like I don't know, I think religion over in the Eastern Europe is kind of dead, right? We're in like, and even the sort of like, there is this state mentality, but it's just nationalism, and no one really believes it. It's sort of cynicism, right? It's sort of national cynicism in Russia. Whereas in China, they do still believe in the sort of communist unity that I think is being perpetuated. Like, they've embraced capitalism, but only as communists. Like where Russia, it's been an absolute clusterfuck they've lost, and then they're trying to scramble to regain power in a kind of fascistic regime. The Chinese, it's not like that. And I think the funny thing is that because of that, the see an end goal, and they don't want to lose the world in a war that they know that can't be won. So I think that the way that we're going to see conflict develop, Russia is a second-rate power. It's gone. Right, let's be honest. It's already gone. We can actually look past it. The saber rattle all they want. Them and the DP, what is it? The North Korea are equally as essentially meaningless. They're just second-rate powers. Like whatever. Like no one cares. Right, that's the DPRK. No one really cares. Right. China's the only real threat to the West. And the West is gaining more and more power, more and more supremacy in relation to the world. And to be entirely honest with you, it's only going to increase because I predict more than anything, we will find Russia will end up being part of the West. We are seeing the fall of Russia and the collapse of Russia. In 50 years, Russia will be one of us. And we will be looking eastward. And what we're seeing is essentially the global hegemony of liberalism spreading, to the point in which liberal freedoms, I think, will eventually end up as essentially, we're talking about this multipolar world. That's not what I see. I don't see a movement towards a multipolar world. I see a movement towards a singular polar world. And one which I think is actually looking better. But ultimately, we as the West need to remember ourselves so that it doesn't turn to shit again. The US power depends upon fossil fuels to power it. Yeah, but I mean, you forget that the US has a shit ton of fossil fuels itself, that all of the fossil fuel is traded in the US dollar, and the real power of the US economy comes from the fact that it is the world's reserve currency, and there's no one who can step up to actually fulfill that role. If you start breaking it into regional powers, then global monolithic powers will gain even more power because they'll be able to subvert smaller markets. They'll have greater buying power. They'll have greater, essentially, the global markets will consume the smaller markets. So I think BRICS is a joke. I think BRICS is an absolute joke. I think anyone who's looked into it will realize that all of the economies bar China bar China are incapable of fulfilling an economic role that is of any meaning. And the only way that the yen can be a global reserve currency of any sort of that anyone would care about is if it essentially went with a single currency that was for both its internal politics and its external politics. Because right now, China has one currency, it's like the NIMBY or whatever, for its internal politics, and then has the yen for external trading. And it would have to allow us, if it got rid of the NIMBY, just went with the yen, it would have to allow us essentially in there to take control. I think India is an important player, but India, again, remember, these export-based economies are entirely dependent upon us as consumers, as the consumers. So we can export, we can change who we buy from. They can't change who they sell to. We have way more power than us. We have way more power than them.
Crazy stance will maybe stop.
Thank you very much. I want to bring Stephen in here on this kind of moving more and more into the virtual world where kind of that almost becomes...
Russia's changed to itself sold to. No, Freudian slip. I think I said they have... I think I said, if I'm not sure, I think I might have said we have more power than us, which I think is like maybe like a true Freudian slip. They've changed who they sell to. I think that the point is with Russia, the have and the haven't. They've not managed to recuperate that, like how much they are essentially gaining from Europe. They're selling really to us through third parties in terms of the oil, and they're doing it at a discounted rate. The natural gas that they're selling to China, it's nowhere near the market size of Europe. So it's one of those things where Russia's being there's like a cartoon of Russia being bent over a table, like it was like a Russian bear being bent over by a panda. Russia is now a vassal state for China, and anyone who thinks otherwise just doesn't understand what's going on. Russia does what it's told. Russia has to do what it's told, which is why it's invited Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party to be closer to it. And as they get closer, they are discarding Putin's regime and making closer ties to the Russian people itself. So China's just getting in with Russia before the regime changes, and we're doing the same. Like, we're looking towards essentially making inroads and putting pressure on Russia so the regime does collapse. And then we're putting pressure on China because we have more power than China's a big player. Like, it'll be undeniable to say that it's not. But we have ultimately more power over China. Like, we could collapse China's economy whilst going into a major recession but recovering. They would have no one to sell to. They would have no outside investment. It would have to turn into a hot war for them to survive, because they would have to end up in a war of conquest. And they don't have the means to fight the United States and NATO. So
comes now more of our reality than reality. And I particularly want to ask you about we haven't really discussed the commercial interest behind games, but the more time we spend on time, and we've talked
China could go to Rumble
about it almost as if it's innocuous, right? But there are commercial interests behind the games we play, behind the companies that we are engaging with in terms of our identities online, and their interests are not flourishing of the human race. They are very, in some cases, nefarious, in some cases purely commercial.
We're only dependent upon China for our refining because we've given China that role. Like, that's the only reason. Like, we can industrialize. The beautiful thing about the Industrial Revolution is that I think people think that industrialized areas are now, like, look at it like this. Like, it was expected that Germany was going to basically not be able to produce a LPG, like infrastructure, which would replace Russian gas for many years. They did it in a year. Like, we can replace China. China can't replace us. Now, that's not to say that, like, China's not valuable to it. We want China. We like China. China's capitalist as fuck. And China, like, essentially does what we want. Like, we're all happy with China. Like, that's the truth of it. Like, I'm not saying that China's happy with the status quo. That's why it's not really associating with Russia too hard. It takes years to build up the systems required for this level of refining. I'm not saying that it doesn't, but it's saying that we can replace it. It might take some time, but we can replace it. And what will they lose? They'll lose all of the technological sophistication necessary for like microchip production. Like, they can make them, but they can't design them. Like, there's so much that is so much involved here.
How do you see that future?
Not including the fact that their entire economy is based upon an export. Like, if they lose us, like, if we lose refineries, like, essentially, we'll be able to manage to purchase through third parties. Their economy will drop. They'll sustain to a certain level with the same as Russia. We'll take what we need, right? And they'll sell it to her because they'll need to sell it to her. And then when we've got what we need and we've built up the resources necessary to replace them, we'll do so. And we'll cast them off. That's the truth of it. They can learn to design them. Yes, they can. I mean, I'm not saying they can't, Cutlass. But, like, R&D is a way different beast to what the Chinese are used to doing, which is essentially reverse engineering. When you've got to engage in a kind of research and development which makes you world leaders, that the United States does, that Europe does, that Japan does, it's a way different kettle of fish. You've got to be willing to lose money, and you've got to have the money to lose, right? Which means you need a robust banking sector, which means you need the kind of economy you have to structure has to be service based, not really like export based in the way that China's is essentially at the minute. Like, Hong Kong is the only part of that country, like Hong Kong and Beijing is the only part of that country that is essentially like built up to facilitate that.
As we spend more and more time, how do you personally even navigate it in a way that you don't just become a puppet to these very powerful companies who've got very extensive tools to ensure that the more time you spend...
I don't think you're understanding debt versus GDP very well, Tomato. I think that, like, I think you actually want to run like the way that we're actually, and that the banking system, and specifically the way we function is by running large amounts of deficits, like huge deficits, have a purpose in the modern world. It's not like we're not like the way that you're approaching it as if the economy functions like the 1940s. Like the larger your deficits. Now you're preaching growth. I'm not. I think that look. We can talk about this another time. We'll get into this.
And online, the more you're aligning with what they want you to be doing.
Yeah, so I'm curious, for this analogy, how many of you guys here like play any type of game on the computer, PlayStation, Xbox? Okay, decent enough. Okay. I'm 34 years old. When I grew up, games were kind of messy. Sometimes there were glitches. It was difficult to figure out what you had to do.
What are you talking about messier now? Well, definitely messier now. Every AAA title that comes out is half done.
Everybody was kind of like exploring and breaking new ground. You know, we didn't even agree on like PlayStation, for instance, the circle button or the X button should be go to the next menu. There was a lot of disagreement on what a game should look like, what the rules should be, how they should be structured. As we've moved through time for games, people have kind of figured out these formulas, and we've iterated relentlessly on these formulas to create these hyper-capitalized, hyper-globalized, like non-unique experiences where every single game is like, when you're playing FPSs these days, it's like you have a check mark on a map, you have a
It is painful, it is. Like, it's the same game over and over again. I do agree.
Marker on your screen, and you kind of like, you run there, you shoot guys, you pick up the item, then you go to the next check mark, and there's almost no cognitive interaction at all with the game you're actually playing. It's just run to the next check mark over and over again. Ubisoft is infamous for this. EA does this. Every major manufacturer does this for games. And I think one of the big problems is we look at manufacturers or we look at big capital interest, and I think the issue is actually us as people don't usually choose pain or suffering. Usually what we choose is the thing that makes us feel immediate gratification. And I think that today there's so much money behind creating actual games or social media or literally anything else we interact with in life that they've hooked into that process in the human mind, and they found a way to make a lot of money by hijacking our processes where we say, gimme, gimme, gimme exactly what I want. I feel like in life in general, I think we've tried to remove or eliminate almost all the friction that we have because we want to get rid of things that don't make us feel good immediately, but then we end up depriving ourselves of kind of like the long-term fulfilling things that truly like gratify us or give us gratification in ways that short-term things never could. I would compare it to, you could spend 36 hours browsing TikTok or Reddit, and you can be on your phone and you can be hooked and you can do it, and after those 36 hours, you might not remember like a single meme or picture or song or whatever you watched. You did it and you filled the time. And that experience will never compare to the gratification you get of turning the last page of a book, closing it, having a sigh, and kind of thinking about the experience you just had, wishing there was a second book.
That's so based, man. Like, Stephen, like, this is like Destiny being based as fuck right now. Like, this is a genuine, like, this is a very good Destiny moment. Like, very, very well done, Stephen. I like this. I like this take.
If you're a fan of Game of Thrones, realizing there's never going to be another book coming. But yeah, we have this issue where we've tried to remove the friction out of.
He's saying it's almost done. I mean, come on, man. He's almost done
everything. And I don't really know if it's a problem so much with companies. I know we blame big companies, but I think the thing is companies give us what we want, and what we've been demanding relentlessly is just no friction, no hurdles, no boundaries. Just give us everything we want now. And I feel like the richest things in life usually come after a little bit of suffering, a little bit of work, a little bit of practice. I was a musician in college. That's what I went to school for. And there's an indescribable feeling of nailing a passage after you've been practicing for days and days and days, or weeks or months if it's a recital piece, and finally hitting something at the correct tempo. And no amount of scrolling TikTok or Reddit will ever emulate that feeling.
Thank you, Stephen. Lisa, I want to bring you in because games obviously aren't going anywhere. If anything, we're all going to be spending way more time in the virtual world. But to me, that seems like we're actually spending more and more time in a space curated by people seeking to exploit kind of the basest instinct.
I didn't even realize this wasn't even HD. It was like
it's within us.
The whole time.
How do we negotiate that, and what are some of your concerns around that, and how, what advice would you give, to young people? It's like you hear a lot of people say, oh, it's also terrible. It's not going anywhere. We are moving in that direction. I think it's relentless. I can't see any kind of U-turn on our greater integration with tech. But how can we navigate that in a way that we're not just puppets for big corporate interests?
So, Miriam, that is the most important question of our time. And in the iteration that Stephen points to so clearly, we have all the possibilities of information from today, historically going backward. But what is not in the pulse...
I've been trying not to point this out, but her mouth sounds so dry, man. Someone please get her a glass of water.
Iteration of all the information today.
You know she's high. You know she's high. You know that's some cotton mouth right there. Like,
date is what this room of artists, of writers, of activists, of those who read and imagine already have, which is the leap of freedom. You could call it the quantum leap. The imagination that does not merely construct but detects something, the touch on the Sistine Chapel. You have a transcendent faculty, which you live through because you are here as writers, as readers, as artists, as thinkers. Our awakened brain is our way up and out of any iteration. So no matter...
Okay, I think what she's pointing towards is revelation there. Okay, I like it, I think.
How broad the new gamification might be.
Yeah, she needs to lose the words a little bit. Like, what she needs to do is, like every Hegelian, right? She needs to bring it back to, like, real-life words. Like, she's built up this, like, vocabulary, which is cool. Like, she's clearly got some really insightful thoughts. I genuinely think so. But she needs to bring it down. I think when she's saying a quantum leap, I think she really means the TV show, but I'm not sure.
AI is only based on information to date, but that which we have yet to discover, your yellow door, and put more ontologically into the frame of reality, our yellow doors, are not in AI. And they can only be found through your transcendent neurodocking station, not through any machine.
Transcendent neurodocking station, that's a new one. Okay, that's a new one.
So you are free. You are free. And because this is so important to me, I've given to everyone the science in the awakened brain. It's a gift. You are free.
I think that she's actually got I think she's a genuine spiritualist, Jeremy. I think you're saying she's bewitched by language. I don't think that she is. I think that it's the abstract religion, right? It's too heavenly, right? Like it's I guess in the sense bewitched by language, in the sense you could say it's universals, right? In the same way that like a religious person, like this transcends our experience, and there is a greater meaning there, and that, you know, I think that she's probably in touch with it in many ways, but she's struggling to bring it back down. Yeah, it's sublime. I like that. Yeah, she's struggling to bring that sublimity back down to the earthly here and now. That's what's stopping her being a philosopher, right? You know.
You are free.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our panel.
That was really great, guys. I actually really enjoyed that. That was a lovely conversation. I'm actually very glad I got to see that.